Okay, I think we have the participants in. I don't know if some more will trickle in as we go along. Hopefully this is all working at the technical front, but let's kick this off. Welcome everybody, a warm welcome to this workshop today on new technologies and atrocity crimes. Thank you, very good. We have the visual. My name is Christian Schläpfer and I'm delighted to be moderating this workshop. I work at the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs of Switzerland, and I'm also representing Switzerland in the GAAMAC steering group. Perhaps before we kick off, just 2 or 3 logistical remarks. If you do have technical problems, please contact the support office through the yellow chat bot at the bottom of the platform. Hopefully they can help you out. And we also have a wonderful team working in the background, kind of taking notes of our discussion that will be shared at the end. So we'll have a kind of visual summary of this discussion. There's also interpretation available. So if you prefer to listen to this in French and communicate in French, you can choose so. And I believe we even have Spanish, but don't quote me on this. But you can choose the channel at the bottom of the platform. And the last point on the sort of logistical front I want to make is this is a workshop. This is not meant to be a lecture. We'll have input from our distinguished experts, but then we hope that you will all engage with your experience, with your questions, with your suggestions. So this will be an open conversation when we get to it after the first introductory remark. So what we want to do today is we want to look at how, or examine how technologies are indeed related to atrocity threats, or new ones, or indeed exacerbating existing ones. And we want to explore how we can think, or we have to think about this development in order to get better and more effective at prevention. Because what we want to do is talk about the result as in the solutions, not just the problems. And our technological change, of course, affects our lives in a multitude of ways. We communicate virtually to levels not seen before. We integrate technology in our everyday lives. Technology is also transforming the way governments deliver services or uphold security, how we wage war, how we educate, how we provide healthcare, and so on. It's a vast topic. Specifically on the issue of hate speech, which is really the focus of this conference or of this meeting, technological change, of course, has also profound effects all around the world. And if we consider that today only about half of the world's population even has access to internet in the first place, this is a trend that will actually become ever more important, so ever more necessary to be thinking about it, also in terms of atrocity and atrocity prevention. So we look at hate speech, but we also take a slightly broader view today, because in terms of atrocity prevention, if you want to look at strategies that take effect as early as possible and look at risk factors also in a systemic way. So if we only focus on the moment when hate speech online tips into physical violence, we probably have failed already to prevent. So we have to kind of start earlier than that. So just to kind of frame the issue. So how can we tackle these problems? What solutions out there? How we can, or what needs to be done in the first place? So let's get started with our 2 experts first. We have Kyle Matthews, who is the Executive Director of the Montreal Institute for Genocide and Human Rights Studies in Canada, where he also founded the Digital Mass Atrocity Preventing Lab, which works to counter online extremism and study how social media platforms are being used as a weapon of war. He has worked with the UN High Commissioner for Refugees before, and also recently joined the US Holocaust Memorials Museum Advisory Board on Transatlantic Cooperation for Atrocity Prevention. He's also a fellow at the Canadian Institute for Global Affairs and a research fellow at the Canadian Research Institute on Humanitarian Crisis and Aid. So we'll see a lot of expertise on this topic. Our second expert today is Professor Enzo Cervini, who is the director, among other things, of research and cooperation at the Budapest Center of International Prevention of Genocide and Mass Atrocities. He's also the vice president of the board of the Foundation for the International Prevention of Genocide and Mass Atrocities, and adjunct professor at the Louis University in Rome. He's also currently a project manager at the EU Commission's Department for Informatics. I don't want to prolong these introductory remarks any longer. I think our experts will also be happy to add anything that I may have forgotten. I'll now open the floor for these introductory remarks. We'll be starting with Kyle, And I just want to put the first question to you and then let you speak for a couple minutes, and then we can also react to that afterwards. So Kyle, can you elaborate a little bit more on what your institute is doing in terms of initiatives about analyzing and identifying new trends in this field and how to mitigate atrocity risks emerging from new technologies? So thank you, and over to you, Kyle.
Thank you, Christian, and thank you, GAAMAC, for organizing the session. This is my third time participating in GAAMAC, so I'm very pleased to be here. It would be great to be in person, but we have to do what we have to do in these current circumstances. Also great to be on here with Enzo, who's a distinguished person working in this space. So my comments are going to be more about the work that we do at Migs, but related to, I think the most interesting part is social media and artificial intelligence. I'd like to focus on that. I know our discussion will go deeper, and I also have a lot of interest in some of these other issues of emerging tech being used for atrocity crimes. But I think for us, it's pretty much 10 years ago, the start of the Arab Spring, we created the Digital Mass Atrocity Prevention Lab. We saw that social media was being used to expose violence. Social media was being used for advocacy. So we thought it'd be really interesting to start looking more at social media and convening people from the atrocity prevention community, human rights activists, and others around how to use tech for good. And then basically, as the Arab Spring progressed, and everyone knows, Syria descended into one of the worst conflicts, and we saw the rise of non-state actors, particularly ISIS. And what I think, starting in 2014, we began to see non-state actors use social media, to incite violence, to spread an ideology, a very violent genocidal one, but also to expose their atrocity crimes. We began to see that non-state actors could use social media for a cost of pennies to commit atrocities. So we began to switch our work and look at how this was happening and how we could monitor this. So we started working with Global Affairs Canada to look at the role of artificial intelligence in dealing with online networked hate. Unsurprisingly, looking at how AI was promised to be the most amazing tool that could moderate social media platforms looking for signs of incitement to hate or extremism. We began to see that actually, there were a lot of takedowns by Facebook or Twitter's artificial intelligence, but sometimes there were mistakes. We look at the case of Myanmar, where incitement by religious leaders and the military on Facebook really helped escalate atrocities against the Rohingya, but there were actually severe problems with Facebook's model. So they expanded into an authoritarian country that didn't have a lot of freedom of speech or press freedom before. And it turns out that they never hired enough people that spoke the language to moderate their platforms. And instead they had to depend on AI, but the algorithms could not detect memes. They could not detect images. Even some of the, so the problem is, and we've seen this recurring with Ethiopia in the last couple of weeks with the Facebook papers, is that we see social media platforms expand into countries and they simply don't have the capacity, either human moderators or AI, to moderate their platforms. So that's become a major issue. And I think that's something that the atrocity prevention community has to think about how to better ensure platform governance for deleting hate speech and incitement to violence. And we're not entirely there. Then we've also began to do more work working with AI companies to monitor what's happening online. So it's one thing to say, we see hate speech, but to get wider patterns, because there's, like policing Facebook, policing Twitter, there are billions of users on those platforms. So we've had to work with AI companies to monitor hate speech related to the COVID pandemic in Canada, hate speech and incitement related to anti-immigrant sentiment in Canada. We're now doing work also looking at online anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial, working with partners like UNESCO and others to kind of really look at what are the words, are there events that take place that trigger it, but also are there outside actors? We're also seeing increasingly armies of AI-powered bots that are online that are sometimes being used to deploy in order to foment identity issues in certain countries or societies in order to try to create more divisions. And that misinformation has a highly tied link to online hate. So Christopher, the founder of Sentinel, has talked about this, but he said that, hate speech loads the gun, but misinformation pulls the trigger. And I think we're seeing that in certain cases where sometimes under closed platforms, we've seen sporadic violence break out in Sri Lanka, and which governments have been forced to put the internet kill switch in order to stop online hate and stuff from going on. I don't know if that's the proper way to deal with the problem, but clearly we need to be thinking about this more. We need to be thinking about other aspects of AI that are being used, such as deepfake technology, which are creating AI artificial videos that could, now this being used for revenge porn and targeting women, but it could be used to incite violence or to show minorities in a society insulting someone or a figure or religion that could become a powder keg. We need to learn how to detect these more properly. And we also have machine-driven communications, which is a form of AI that's going to be able to do micro-targeting. And one can only imagine in authoritarian states or closed societies how these AI tools could be used through social media to target and whip up hate or anger or division. So that's a bit of the work that we've been doing. It's fascinating, but it also requires a complexity and partnerships between atrocity prevention community, NGOs, governments, UN, to work more closely with people that have some of these tech skills, because right now we're working in silos and we really need, I think, the atrocity community to work towards prevention, to really understand the issues behind platform governments and come up with some solutions to build some digital resiliency against the misuse of AI or the failures of AI in managing these platforms. Those will be my opening comments.
Thank you, Kyle, very much for these insightful remarks, and also kind of pointing towards a crucial issue which we might actually be able to discuss a little bit further together afterwards in terms of the human factor in all of this. Of course, we talk about technology, but who is the gun and who's pulling a trigger and who's loading what? And so is the problem the technology, or is it the societies and individuals using them? And in terms of prevention, what does that mean? Where do we have to kind of address the issue? But again, I think we can come back to that. I'll now give the floor to Enzo for his remarks. Enzo, over to you.
Thank you so much, and I apologize, but I wanted to shrink those opening remarks with a few data and visualizing it. And but let me start by saying thank you for GAAMAC and for hosting such an interesting workshop. And I couldn't agree more with some of the concluding remarks of Kyle in his opening statement about the need of reinforcing this stakeholders community and in challenging those threats together. But let me start by saying one very crucial thing that I think is at the top of our conversation today. Technology is being said that it can do a lot of things and can do great things and can do bad things, but actually technology doesn't want anything. I mean, it's up to us to decide what technology is able or unable to do, and what the bad is able to generate, especially in terms of atrocities. But if I can say just in brief points, what are the emerging trends that we see that are related a lot with this new, I would say, society 4.0 situation and also atrocities 4.0 environment. We see more and more less morality and less limits and less rules inside society. We see weapons that are faster in their execution, that are harder to control, and that are always more remote. And so they are felt quite inhumane on one side, but as well not part of the problem sometimes. And the environment, as Kyle was already suggesting, we have many more players on the ground. we have non-state actors that have been generating a new path into the atrocities realm. We have a lot of gray zones where we don't know what is happening, and we have no boundaries anymore. And those no boundaries are related as well to the fact that there is and there was, for the at least for the last decade, an involution of the logic of the fact that international organizations were there to actually set the boundaries when states or non-state actors were crossing them. And on data and technology, we of course we are more advanced than ever in that field, and we still are not sure until when we will be able to advance in this segment. But it's true that especially technology and warfare technology is always more controlled by privates and not only states, and this sets a new trend as well to be looked at. And finally, and this is actually something extremely important, the regulatory framework that we are seeing done lately. Yesterday, the UNESCO approval on the recommendations on the use of artificial intelligence, but as well the regulation of proposal for regulation of the European Commission are not dedicated to military scopes. And this is something that is extremely worrying, because there is a sort of no regulation in this field. Going back to technology, this is a clear example of how data is trending, and technology can help us. Many of the cases that we see here were already anticipated by Kyle. We see a lot of combination by merging the situation at world level on the capacity to actually also be able to predict more and to actually analyze what are the trends inside the conflict zones, especially in those conflict zones where atrocities are more alike to happen nowadays. And one of those, of course, was COVID, and the fact that we had an important idea regarding the fact that COVID would have assisted, I would say, the trends over towards atrocities to decline, and instead this was exactly the opposite in many of those countries. And so I think that here we need to understand how tragic is the situation, but as well the trends that technology is able to generate in terms of possible preventive capacities. And of course, 10 conflicts to look at: Ethiopia, India and Pakistan, Myanmar, Haiti, Belarus, Colombia, Armenia and Azerbaijan still being in the loop, Yemen, Mozambique, the whole Sahel region that is about to collapse. On the emerging threats, I think here one of the things actually collide a lot with what Kyle said, that the algorithmically driven social media connection are capable of funneling individuals into transnational but culturally enclosed echo chambers that are radicalizing their worldview, and this actually leads a lot to the fact that we have medias that are really funneling hate speech and generating parts and elements to be worried about, and those are mostly driven by capacity of technology, so chatbots mainly, or bots. International security is destabilized at the institutional level by the way of the fourth industrial revolution, and this needs to be taken a lot in account, because it blurs the lines, so those boundaries that I was referring before. The responsibility for defending citizens is effectively shifting away from the state and towards the private sector. And this is something that, I mean, this is thanks to technology, and this is a worrying effect. The means of war are changing at faster pace than responses might be built to respond. And artificial intelligence tools are used, especially the ones for monitoring and global surveillance in ways that they were not meant to be for. Possible responses, I think a regulation process that looks ahead on how emerging technologies could conceivably be weaponized, and state and other security actors need to start exploring with each other some of the concepts and models of modes of operation that would make such a network approach sustainable and legitimate as well. And I think that here, last is non-state actors and NGOs need to be reactivated in their scope as e-watchers of these global trends and empowered to sustain the vacuum of knowledge in societies, as Kyle was saying. Just brief notes here that, of course, towards a multipolar task force to prevent mass atrocities in the era of geopolitical change, climate threats to security and digital transformation was one of the latest proposals of the Budapest Center for Mass Atrocities Prevention. And with this, I would like to stop this first remarks and hope to engage in a fruitful conversation.
Thank you very much, Enzo, for this overview. Also opening, as it were, new issues ranging from, the role that technologies really do and can play in the commission of atrocities, also the ethical concerns around automation, where actually what I said before, the human element is disappearing. So that creates a whole new challenge. But also, of course, the way we can use technology to get better at predicting risks. And I think there has been a lot of work being done in the last probably decade or more on trying to get better at it. And I don't think we've gotten very good at it yet. So, but I think the hope that technology can help us in getting better at spotting those risks early enough to be able to respond. I think that's an interesting point to think about. We will be opening now the floor to questions and reactions from the floor. I'll invite colleagues to indicate in the chat box, or I think if it works, raising their hands, and we can do that. If at all possible, I would invite also participants to switch on their video so we can have a little bit of a workshop atmosphere as much as it works here. It's easier to kind of get it back and forth. First, I think to kick us off, I would ask Kyle and Enzo to just react to each other if there are points you would like to add or reactions you have, and just throw in another point to make in there from a sort of GAAMAC perspective. What GAAMAC tries to do is look at early prevention, which means often or primarily prevention at the national level. Of course, with new technologies and with this global phenomenon, we have the tendency to think about it in global terms. But of course, the solution might very much be at the local level. I think Kyle mentioned the issue of languages for one. I think to see how can you respond to a problem that's happening within one language, like a global response will not give us the answer. So how can we think of prevention also at the kind of small scale, national, it doesn't really matter, but like and not global response to this question, and who do we have, who are the actors, who are the driving actors where we have to kind of address this issue. That's just another reflection to bring in there. So I'll hand it first to Kyle, then to Enzo, and then I think we'll already have questions in the chat, which I'm trying to pick up in a minute, but over to Kyle for now.
Yeah, no, I liked Enzo's presentation. I think he touched upon quite a few other issues that are not directly related to hate speech, but on the technology side, emerging tech and for atrocities are directly related. So, for example, he mentioned about the issues of surveillance, and we've seen the rise of surveillance tech being used to monitor minorities, monitor journalists, human rights activists. It's been all over the news, the Israeli company NSO, that their technology has been used for for shady governments or others to monitor people's cell phone activities, taking away the right of privacy, but also sometimes to repress stories or to suppress people trying to warn about human rights abuses. So there's a whole discussion about the need to regulate surveillance technology, and we've also seen across the world there's been a pushback against certain Chinese companies that have been directly engaged in using AI-powered facial recognition technology to monitor Uyghur minorities. So this is something that's exploding on the scene that we have to wrap our heads around. The other two is about, that also I think jumped out was Enzo talking about how these technologies are upending society, how they can be misused, and that we haven't really caught up to it yet. And I think that's entirely true. There have been, though, some interesting things emerging. We've had, increasing a call to set up a digital Geneva Convention, realizing that digital technologies, I mean, we look if a country will bomb a hospital or a school, we see that as a war crime, and there's regulation in place. But if there's a cyber attack against a hospital that shuts down the entire energy grid or life-saving treatment and people die, that's using these cyber technologies that results in the loss of human life and of civilians. So I think that's also something that we need to support. Just this week also, a couple of years ago at the Paris Peace Forum, the French government launched with Microsoft something called the Paris Call that states and those would resume using cyber offensive capacities against civilian infrastructure. US just signed on, but there's still other countries that haven't. So it's a very interesting point where we see governments, NGOs, private sector starting to work together to create more rules and frameworks around the misuse of some of these technologies that go above and beyond hate speech.
Yeah, on my side, I think that recalling what just to add and maybe also empowering the very first response to Marie that is in the chat. When it comes to hate speech and emerging technologies, how should government work with the tech sector and tech experts and civil society to act in a preventive manner? I think is an important question. And well, let me put it this way. I think that there is a very important phenomenon that has been changing lately. This is due to the new, let's say, revelation of the ethical quest around emerging technologies, and is the fact that governments have started building up specific strategies and specific regulations on the technology sphere, especially because there was a vacuum that was actually led mainly by the private sector. So the big five were controlling hate speech on their way to control hate speech, and this has led, of course, to situations that were completely non-regulated in an unregulated world. That was, for example, the kick out of Trump from many social medias. But these need, I mean, the response from the private sector, and this was one of the trends that I underlined, is that the regulatory framework is mostly done by the private sector and not by the public sector, and here is there is something that is really discomforting, but that is exactly to the point of the fact that policymakers actually are very away from being technology savvy, and this actually leads them to not respond to these quests, to those challenges, and actually triggers the other part, that is the response of on prevention, but as well on action, is done mainly by the private sector, that has actually no whatsoever history in synergizing with the civil society. So this is the other part, is that the private sector normally was able to confront with governments, but was never part of this, I will call it the 5 helix domain, that is the new domain that we need to support, that is the public, the private, the academia, the civil society, and the international organizations all together in building responses on emerging threats. And this phenomena is not there, especially when it comes to hate speech. I think that there is another element that was touched by Kyle, that is the language problem. Tech is extremely advanced in few languages, but that languages are off the grid of the support to emerging technologies. This is an incredible problem, especially related to the natural language processing progress of technologies leading to artificial intelligence domains that we need to take in account. So I think that when looking at the problem itself, if we speak about technology, we need to speak about the environment and the fact that, for example, hate speech is very I mean, one of the things that we've been working a lot with in the Budapest Center at European and national level, where the rise of hate speech that actually right now is at the top of the problem, especially with Poland having an invasion of refugees and being attacked by others, has fomented a massive hate speech rollout that is physically not controlled by the social media, because they don't have a lot of knowledge on the language at the international level, on Polish, for example, and this phenomena needs to be taken in account and is part of the solution. The problem still remains that policymakers, as I said before, are not tech savvy, are not taking the risk of regulating the internet because of the freedom of expression. I would say problematics that are still there and that have not been confronted. I would say in a 4.0 dimension.
Thank you to both for that. Perhaps just a question, Marie, whether your question has been answered, or if you want to follow up, please feel free to take the floor if you wish to do so. Answered. Very good. Vadim, would you like to just introduce your question yourself, perhaps?
I see in the call also Georgi Tatar, that is living in Hungary and knows a lot the situation in the region, especially around Fidesz. I don't know if he wants to give an input on this.
Yes, I think we had Vadim just unmuting, so hopefully that should work. If you want to ask a question, let's try this. That would be great.
I am available if you want. Hi.
Yeah, go ahead.
Even my picture, I can just. Oh, sorry. It's a very interesting point. And first of all, thanks for both the introductory remarks. Interesting, and it is a very important thing what we tackle. So I would also say this is something that we need to pay more attention when preventing mass atrocities to the emerging security issues. And here in this respect, the technology is, I think, #1. So in the next few years, this will be a very important thing. And the speakers did not mention, Enzo maybe just touched upon the issue that the military aspects of the new technologies and the impact of military aspects on mass atrocities, on the perpetration and on countering, this is something which will have to be really responded to. As to the concrete questions of Vadim, I hope I pronounce his name correctly. I think here it is judicial measures. So yes, we could do something, and the regulations and could be touched upon. But here in the case of Hungary, and I also think also in the case of Poland, and the case of many societies, it is a question of autocracy, is a question of a completely new approach of democracy, of democratic things. So I think there is no way for the judicial measures. We need to, the Hungarian nation, the Polish nation needs to do something, but this is not about regulations. It's about a political thing which need to be changed. And very honestly, just among us, I don't see that what is the role of technology in this. This is so purely political thing, you know, that unfortunately this is not about the AI, artificial intelligence situation. So, if I may say this very simply. And sorry, if you want to reformulate the question, I am happy to respond it. But maybe the other colleagues could also give some response to that.
Perhaps if I can just, I think Vadim, we didn't hear you before. I'm not sure if your mic is not working. If you want to try again.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Excellent.
Okay, thanks. So I would like just add that you have European Court of Human Rights, and people even from Russia, of course from Poland and Hungary, they can apply through the Strasbourg court. And also as European citizens, you have European Union court in Luxembourg. So maybe I don't think that is no way, because also you have this practice of 2 European courts, so people can go there. But of course, it's a difficult process. And for example, if Roma minority rights they are violated, they also finally can go there through NGO or through judicial community. Thank you.
Thank you, Vadim, for the explanation. Kyle, Enzo, do you want to come back on this?
I'm not really an expert on European jurisdiction for right-wing populists, so I can give it a pass. If it's hate speech online, then there are always options to report it, but we see increasingly some platforms are reluctant to remove heads of state or other influential leaders from their platforms. I mean, it was done against Trump, but it's not done against, and there's a long list of people that misuse their social media profiles, but I can't really talk about the legal aspect of this.
Okay, I will try to take it from another angle that actually leads to a case not in Europe but in Colombia, where the Constitutional Court of Colombia has adopted an artificial intelligence that is called Pretoria, in which I was quite involved, and the idea is that nowadays, with the demand of increasing demand of justice, dealt with the digitalization of public sectors, and we have an increasing demand of rights and petitions to the judiciary in given countries. And one of the things that AI can be used for somehow is exactly to deviate the biases that are constructed at human level. Let me take it from the other perspective of the fact that AI can be extremely useful in the case of bias in society, especially in ethnical divided societies or political divided societies, because artificial intelligence actually captures the demand and values the demand in base of the law. I mean, always, as I said, depending on what we ask technology to do and how we ask technology to do it. But indeed, technology in this sense can be a positive solution to a phenomena of social bias based on race of technology or ethnicity of the judicial system itself. So again, we can use technology both in a proactive and non-proactive way, or preventive or demolishing way.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, friends, the floor is still open. If anybody has any further questions, I also invite people to share other different points of views, like from your experience, from your context, where you see these issues at play, something that we haven't talked about. Please do feel free to bring that up. I'm just reading here. I think we do have a questions from Pablo. Pablo, would you like to just ask your questions live, or I think that would be wonderful. If not, then I will just read it out. UN tools like the 2019 UN Strategy and Action Plan and the Rapid Action Plan are effective and are sufficiently implemented. That's a question. How do you think the UN system could improve its engagement? I think good question. I'll just add on to that my earlier question about like thinking about global but also national to make that link. Perhaps we can react to that. And after that, we have Marie with a question that can come on. But let's take this one first. Kyle first.
Yeah, well, I think the 2019 UN strategy and action plan against hate speech we should welcome that there's actually something that's been introduced, and it is also looking at both online and offline components of it. So that's an important sign. I know the UN Office for Prevention of Genocide has been working to push this, also working with tech companies, holding multiple consultations. I know that also has resulted in a UN hate speech working group. And now my understanding is that there are certain UN agencies that are beginning to integrate countering hate speech, both online and offline, into their agency structures and institutionalizing some response and monitoring. So I think that's absolutely positive. Is it fast enough? Is it doing as much as we'd like? Probably not. But I think anyone working in genocide prevention realized that, we had the UN Convention on Genocide came about in 1948, and it's only in 2007 that the UN set up an office to deal with this problem. So we are always a little bit delayed, but I think this measure by the plan of action is welcomed, and I think it does give some credibility and support if the UN is speaking out, the Secretary General or agencies that have won the Nobel Peace Prize for issues that can speak out publicly and do advocacy on this and raise it as a higher international issue as it relates to mass atrocity crimes.
If I can add on top of what Kyle said, that I think was extremely relevant. One of the things that I notice a lot, and especially lately, working with the UN in another field that is the technological one, the UN has been very silotic. So I think that the UN strategy and action plan and the Rabat action plan should be transversal in all the UN fields, and this was actually something not happening at all. I think that this leads to really to silos into the conversation also at the UN level and in the conversation between the UN and states, where there is technology improvement, but actually there is no whatsoever idea of what the Rabat action plan is, or how to actually engage states in other fields, taking into account the Rabat action plan. So I do think that as the silotic element that I was referring to, being it private sector, being it public sector, and the fact that stakeholders are completely divided among them or left apart in the case of the civil society, makes it extremely difficult to actually put in practice those action plans. And the idea here is exactly to revert the action and really engage in prevention in a I would say multi-stakeholder perspective, thinking at the positive effects. I think that in one good example is exactly COVID. I think that in a way we should think about how much the response at global level went into the pandemic, into trying to prevent escalation of the pandemic to take place, and react synchronously with that same spirit. And this something that I still don't see especially in the prevention community. And the disengagement of states in this segment is extremely high.
Thank you, Enzo. And also on this last point, of course, that a critical issue is and challenging this field as always. Is this okay? When do measures have to be taken, and how early? When are they too much, and how are they justified? I mean, this in the prevention field, this is the eternal challenge. And I think on these issues, we've seen with COVID and the response, we've seen a good example, but I think we can learn from that as well for other fields. I have the question from Marie. Marie, over to you.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you.
My question is more on the relationship between civil society groups, tech experts, and then the people who actually create and come up with the technologies. When I heard Mark Zuckerberg talk about the metaverse, like it's an utopia where you can go to concerts together and have meetings and blah blah. What I heard was more like the terrible Facebook groups that we have sometimes. These like virtual gated communities where perhaps hate speech could be particularly bad, and you could have all kinds of mischief. And I was wondering what the two speakers think about how civil society should work, how civil society groups and tech experts should work with the Silicon Valley, for example, to warn them about these potential consequences that again and again they fail to acknowledge.
Excellent question. Also, I think something governments are struggling with it as well. This multi-stakeholder engagement, always a challenge. But Kyle, perhaps you go first.
I'm just going to refer back to Enzo's presentation where he mentioned that there has to be some kind of feedback loop where people are thinking about how technologies can be misused in every possible sense. And I think there's society groups that are trying to pressure tech companies to have kind of human rights impact assessment of their technologies, to do kind of public audits before they're launched, to kind of understand how they can be misused or how they can inadvertently be used by bad faith actors. So we're not perfectly there yet. Some companies are being a little bit more open. They're creating larger human rights teams, but as far as I know, almost in every case, it's human rights groups reacting after technology is released to the public and it's misused than in the engineering phase. So that's, if you look at outside, if you look at Human Rights Watch and the campaign to ban killer robots, that's very more proactive. But designing technologies and having human rights society in the design lab, that's not really happening, in my understanding.
Here I would like to bring a self-reflection for the prevention community. I mean, one of the of the things I've been working very lately on AI is been introduced to me by a group of indigenous and Aboriginal experts on AI. Is a very small group of people, so counting maybe less than 10, 15 people. Very tech savvy, very, I mean, top artificial intelligence experts that have quitted their job in major companies because they felt completely biased by the way technology was driving society, and especially towards their own communities, very, I would say, small communities across the Americas, so from Canada to Brazil. And they were the one engaging the civil society, but somehow very frustrated by the fact that civil society had no responses to their request of how can we help. So there is, I think that there is a necessity of alignment of languages and also more clarity on the prevention community side on what needs to be operationalized in terms of prevention, especially in the tech fields. And it strikes to me the fact that there is very low literature on this among the prevention community and the scholars that are working in this field. So maybe something to clear more among us on how we want technology and tech savvy people to help us with and how.
Thank you, Enzo, for this important point. And yes, of course, private sector being one, if not the key actor in this field, we do have to think about this and think also in probably find new ways of doing that. Looking at time, I want to turn it over to our colleagues from Sonder to give us their visual summary of our discussion, and then we'll wrap it up after that. So don't go anywhere yet. Melanie, over to you.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. So here we have captured a few of the key points that you've been mentioning. I don't know, Christian, if you want to, I mean, you can just have a look at them, but I'll leave it to you if you want to point out some of those key takeaways.
Great. Yeah, I think I'm a bit challenged now by reading this all. I think we'll be sharing this after, so we can have a closer look. I think my final reflection that I would want to do at this point, and perhaps let Enzo and Kyle give their final words on it before we have to close, is we've looked at the problems, the challenges. We've also looked at possible solutions, the way technology can help us. And to put it very provocatively, I think we've looked sort of elsewhere for people to act. We've looked at, okay, the UN has its strategies or work plans, like they have to do something. Governments should regulate, tech companies should do something, be more inclusive in their process and so on. I think what is a bit missing in our conversation is kind of how we as societies deal with that in our conversations. Because again, I think that was my point when we started the conversation, is if we start at the point where the issues are already like that bad, that violence or something leading towards atrocities is already an issue, we have really failed at prevention. We have to look at earlier points. So the human element, the societal element in that, I think, is something that we have to look at also very carefully when we talk about technologies. And it's always a bit tempting if to kind of look at technical solution to technical problems, but of course it's not that simple. So this is just sort of my conclusion. I think this will be shared afterwards, and I will just give Kyle and Enzo their final words. We have 1 minute maximum each. So without further ado, I'll give it to Kyle for concluding remarks.
Concluding remarks is that the digital landscape is not going away. It's going to increase. We're going to have more people online, more people susceptible to misinformation, targeted misinformation that could lead to atrocities. So I just want to say is that it's important for every civil society group, government to realize that this is not going away, that we should start building some expertise in-house of people that understand these issues, that can collaborate more and think about early action, where if we see hate speech online coming from someone in society that has a big platform, what do you do in order to counter that? And I think these are some of the ways we have to think about responding to this. If it's calling people out, if it's keeping this information in order to, for prosecution of incitement to violence, but I think we have to build our capacity and new partnerships to deal with this rapidly changing environment.
Enzo.
Takeaway is that we come to the point that we need to act in a more coordinated way. That there is a lot to do. That I think GAAMAC is a place where to build up a joint response on those trends. This is a platform that actually has the potential to actually empower not just civil society, but actually feed the states into how to act in this field. And I think that relevant work done by the Montreal Institute or by the Budapest Center, among others, because I think that the actors are many, but we've been concentrating a lot on hate speech, both organizations, in regions as well where we thought that there were no trends for mass atrocities, but indeed the level of hate speech and the level of violence in society has really gone over the democracy threshold, as also Georgi was mentioning, that we need to act fast, and I think that part of the response is on GAAMAC to empower this community of that would engage in artificial intelligence and technology and prevention as well.
Thank you, and so these were the perfect final words. Indeed, GAAMAC as a platform is there to link up to, and so I would encourage you to use the platform, get in contact with our experts, continue the conversation. If there's initiatives that come out of that, even better. I think GAAMAC is very much there for that, so we'll encourage you to use that. We've just scratched the surface today, much more to discuss, and we're happy to do so, and hopefully you will join us in that conversation. With that, thank you very much, and excellent rest of the conference. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Christian.
Bye.